Hi, we are a couple minutes past 12:30, so I do want to get started to respect everybody's time. So thank you for joining me today and welcome to our webinar. The webinar today is about options in divorce. A lot of times people don't understand what process that they can go through to have a divorce, go from start to finish. And today I really wanted to take this time to educate you on the divorce options and some stories on what that looked like for my clients to go through that process in these individual cases, and some pros and cons of each of the processes. So I want to start with my story and who I am. So I'm Jennifer Merida. I am a certified divorce financial analyst. I have been working in the financial industry for about 20 years now in various realms of the financial industry, but always working around investments and banking in general. So my story started as I was married for 7 years and ended up finding myself needing to go through divorce. And in this case, I was working in finance the entire time. My degrees were in finance. My licenses were, to get my investment license in finance. So I had a really good base understanding. And I found myself, just like many of you, emotional, scared, really lacking confidence in what decisions were being made, and everything was running so fast and my life was just in a whirl that I really did not understand my options, or I wasn't willing to listen. And sometimes I found myself being overconfident, which was another downfall. If you're either not confident enough or overconfident, those have two different aspects. But I have been divorced now for 8 years in co-parenting with three small children. I now have two more children and married again. And I really look back and I see myself going through that. And I see other people as I'm helping my clients going through a divorce, not understanding what their life is going to be like 2 years from now, or 4 years from now, or 10 years from now. And they're having to make decisions financially, and of course, with their children, if there is children, now that's going to impact them later. And I wish I had someone like me or a financial professional in my corner as I was going through my divorce with the attorney. And I turned right to a family law attorney, as most people do. I didn't know there was other options. I didn't know there were other options that, could have been more beneficial maybe through the process, but I wish I would have known. So today I want to go through with you. And a couple things to go over first is this is your divorce. No two marriages are the same. So what that means is no two divorces are the same. It's really good to have a friend or someone that you can confide in as you're going through this process to talk with and get your emotions out. But when someone starts saying, "Oh, I knew this person and Mary was married for the same amount of years and she got this much money in maintenance, or she got this much of the retirement," and you start having that as your base, and that doesn't set you up emotionally very well, because we don't know the whole story behind what Mary came from or what their assets were, how long the marriage was. We don't know all the details that made Mary's situation, and that why Mary's situation is not your situation. So you need to have the empowerment and the information of, use somebody as a confidant, but don't use them as a cheerleader or sounding board to fight for someone else's situation that's not yours. Because in this, you want somebody else, because I understand, I've been there, of feeling alone and scared and emotional. Those are very common feelings as you're going through the divorce. But when you don't know your options, those can come tenfold, and they can be even stronger. You're also stuck with decisions that are not ideal for your future. And the future, the future you can't imagine yet, because there is a future out there. And that's why you want to build a team to bring you to your better future, because it is out there for you. Let's start looking at your divorce options and what they mean. I'm sure you've all heard of these 4 options, but let's really dig into it with what it is, a story around it, and then reviewing the pros and cons of each of those, and also how a financial professional can help in each of these processes. So the first one we're going to talk about is do-it-yourself pro se is what they call it. Pro se sounds like a lot fancier. And but really, when it comes to this, when is this good? It's good if it's a short-term marriage. If there are no kids that are between the two of you that happen during the marriage through adoption or natural, there's little assets, comparable incomes, which means no maintenance, or they used to call it alimony, but now it's called support, spousal support. So that's a really ideal time that you can go on and grab those forms online and do it yourself and file it with the court when there's not much at stake. And really things are status quo from before marriage to now. You always want to have somebody review. I always give that caveat, have somebody review your documents that knows what they're doing. I think that's a great idea, just so you have somebody on your behalf. And there are a few options that you can get, either lawyers that'll work hourly, that'll say, hey, I'll review this for you, but you're going to go represent yourself in court. And that works out well for a lot of people. Or there's some online services out there as well that can give you some legal advice and legal help. The dangers at this is the decisions are irreversible in most cases. You did it yourself, you knew what you're getting into or didn't know, but you still signed the papers, and it can be complicated. So let's look at Janet's story. Janet was on her 3rd marriage. She was married only almost 5 years. They did not have a lot of marital assets, and they had no children during the marriage. Their incomes were very similar, so there was not going to be any maintenance, which is good. They did have a house, but the house was brought in by her before the marriage, so it was her house. And they really only had, between joint marital assets, a checking and a savings and a small investment account to divide. So it was very simple. They both were willing just to work with each other to get it done, and they knew each other's finances. And it was, like I said, a very simple case. And it was a very successful divorce process. The process was fast. They were able to get through the divorce in a little bit less than 3 months. And it was cost effective for them. They did not have to go to a lawyer. Now, Janet did reach out to a certified divorce financial analyst. She reached out to me, and we were able to divide the assets. So she knew that it was fair. We want to make sure that things are fair. The divorce was brought into, or the marriage was brought into, and you brought your incomes and debts together. So when dividing it out, you just want to make sure that it's equitable distribution and there is fairness to those decisions being made. And so we did bring that. Both parties agreed, or she, made sure that she had a really good understanding. But Janet was on her 3rd divorce, and she really wanted to make sure that, okay, the decisions are being made, but after divorce, how can she set herself up to be financially independent and to meet her savings goals and to meet her retirement goals? So she wanted somebody that understood what she was going through, just to make sure that she was that she was thinking about everything financially, but then working with her afterwards. So that's why pro se, or the do-it-yourself divorce, worked in her case. It was very simple. And then she also worked with a financial professional to make sure she was set up, going through, she was thinking of everything, but then also set up after her divorce was final as well. Now, a couple considerations to think about during pro se. So I want you guys to think about this, because people think it's so great to save all this money, but they're not understanding everything. So some of the disadvantages are really not having someone to protect your rights. If your spouse has a lawyer and you don't, a lot of people say, oh, we're just going to use one lawyer. Only one person can hire a lawyer. So that lawyer can represent. So if it's you and your spouse is like, oh, come use my lawyer, that person can represent your spouse and cannot give you any legal guidance or advice. They can process the paperwork. If you understand and you know everything, that can be okay, but also can be dangerous because you have nobody to turn to. They're not going to help you. They're not hired by you. So understand that going through. You could be leaving money on the table. Like I said, you go into a marriage, you bring your assets together, your debts, It's not taking one person for everything they have, but it's making sure you're getting what's fair, because you don't know what your future holds. You don't know, if an emergency is going to come up, and that money could have helped you during that time. What are the tax impacts of different assets? What is, having equity in a home versus a retirement? So you want to make sure there are like assets and that you understand tax consequences or tax liabilities that go through. So that's why a financial professional also helps. And really, during doing it this way, there's no formal discovery. There's no guidance of the court or, the backing of a court in the legal system. So you could have it easier to hide assets, or somebody could hide assets on you. And that can happen when you're representing yourself. And really understanding who's taking the house, who has the house. Sometimes it's cut and dry, sometimes it's not. And you want to make sure those decisions are made, and really understanding your budget, because your expenses will go up. You had 2 people in one household. Now you're by yourself in one household and paying those bills. So having a good understanding, that's going to be the theme of today. So the next option for going through a divorce, and it's very popular and heard about, is called mediation. So mediation, a divorcing couple works with a neutral mediator who helps both parties come to an agreement in all aspects of the divorce. So it talks about finances, the children, timing, everything in your divorce. So the mediator could be a lawyer or they could not be a lawyer, but they must be extremely well versed in divorce. And it's critical for the mediator to be neutral. They cannot be an advocate for one side or the other. That's very dangerous. Both parties need to consult, or should consult, with their own attorneys during the mediation and prior to signing the settlement agreement. The mediator cannot give legal advice. They are there to be a neutral. They are there to keep emotions at bay, making sure one person's not being overrun by the other. So let's look at Nancy's case. Nancy was married 11 years, and she had 2 small children, 6 and 3. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she had a part-time job, a very small part-time job, didn't make too much income. And then she had a small home business that she had. Her husband, Nick, was a union worker, and he worked all the time. And he was always gone, but he made a good living. He was working for his family. He made a very good living, and they built up, over those 11 years, they built up assets, retirement assets, savings, house equity, and, really just had a lot of considerations to look at. But they wanted the best for their children. They wanted to go through a process that wasn't going to run them through a ringer and have there be hard feelings. They wanted to come out of this ahead. So they said they were going to work together and make decisions together. That was a huge piece of this. And they also had his income and also overtime to take into consideration. So there were a lot of things that they needed to work through that would normally go to litigation or the traditional way, but they did not want that. They wanted to save as much money as possible for their kids and their future, and made that goal and made that decision. So it was emotional, but they could stay strong for their goal and having a good co-parenting relationship. You'll see that a lot. His job was really demanding, and he wanted her to be able to be supported, even though she's the one that asked for the divorce. They knew that they were in trouble for a long time, but they thought they could work on it. And she's the one that finally said, no, I want a divorce. I want to move on with my life. This is not going to work anymore. So it was very emotional, but he really wanted what was best for him, his children, and her. He wanted her to have a good understanding, because she did not have an understanding of finances. She just spent money, and it was there. So not like she was frivolous, but she just wanted, she just knew that it was always going to be there, and that wasn't going to be the case anymore. He wanted what was best for them, but also what was fair for himself. So he really needed to understand his options. And it worked. They came up with solutions and decisions, and they both agreed upon. They each were able to give a little and work with a mediator. They had worked on retirement, children's expenses, time with the children, assets, marital maintenance, and, like I said, child support. One lawyer drew up all the documents, and they went to court, and it was finalized. So the process went a lot smoother, even though they had some asset complications, but they were able to work. It went smooth. And how I helped as a CDFA, And Nancy was very nervous. She knew she needed this divorce. There was a lot more to the story personally there, but she never handled her finance or never had to think about it, like I said. So she just didn't know how to budget. She really didn't understand that how to run cash flow and stick to a budget and what that would look like. Nancy needed understanding if she'd be able to financially survive on her own, and Nick wanted her to understand that as well. And if she could afford the house, they had to make housing decisions. Nick wanted to have a financial professional lay out the marital assets and have a fair plan that they both were going to agree upon in mediation to make mediation successful. They had answers around their financial separation of assets, because some of it was premarital, because he was working for the union for a long time. And now I still work with Nancy. She deserved maintenance for a period of time, about a little less than 5 years. And she really, since she did not have a career of her own, she needed to build up her professional career and also know what happens when that maintenance ends. So we need a plan that happens faster than you think. So I help her plan on a daily basis or a monthly basis of how she's building up to be self-sufficient. Maintenance is not there to replace your income. Maintenance is rehabilitative to get you back on your feet to make your own income. And the judges will agree with that also. And that's how they decide. So she really needed to understand her cash flow and how to save for her goals and her retirement and get the confidence that she was going to be okay when that maintenance ended. She was empowered. She has a plan, and she has a really good relationship with her ex, so they can co-parent like their main goal was. So mediation worked in this case. So let's review the pros and cons of mediation. It can result in a better relationship with your ex, so you're not fighting in court. It's easier on the children since this divorce process is more peaceful. You can get an expedited agreement. It's not prolonged. And it reduces expenses, and that's always beneficial. It can help you stay in control of your divorce because you're making the decisions, not the court. The court can make decisions for you on many different aspects, and that's usually not the best for one person or another. And it allows more discretion. Mediation is private and litigation is public. So it's a more private option. But there are cons to the side as well. And it could be a waste of time and money if negotiations don't work and you need to start over again. Because you need to start over again, you each hire lawyers, and you did have to pay that mediator. And it also, if the mediator is inexperienced and they're biased towards one person or another, the outcome could be really unfavorable for you. It can result in an unenforceable agreement. A mediation agreement that's lopsided or one-sided or poorly drafted can be overturned or challenged in court. It can lead to legal complications as the laws still need to be applied. So you want to make sure you get somebody that knows what you're doing. And also, assets can be hidden in this realm as well under mediation because it's all voluntary disclosure. There's no subpoena of your records, and you can potentially, there could be assets hidden on you. So also, this is not good if you have, if there's any abuse or one spouse is dominating over another spouse and one spouse is submissive. You want to make sure that that financial settlement is fair. And if that's the case, it might not be fair. And you both want legal representation and go through the traditional process, which we'll talk about in a couple stories. So that is mediation. The next more newer process of going through divorce is collaborative. This is a great process. So it's in between litigation and mediation. So simply put, collaborative divorce occurs when a couple agrees to work out the divorce settlement without going to court. So they do not want to go to court. They want to sit in a room and have everybody work together and a team work together for the cause of finalizing the divorce without going to court. During the collaborative process, both you and your spouse will each hire your own attorney who's been trained in the collaborative process or special collaborative training. And the role of the attorneys is to it's quite different than traditional. Each attorney advises their client in negotiation and settling an agreement. So instead of each going back and forth, you're all in the same room and you're advising your client, or that lawyer is advising you on, what's going to fly, what's not, is this fair, is this not fair, but you're all working together for that cause. It doesn't mean emotions aren't there, but it just means that you're really processing to work together. Karen is a great example of collaborative divorce process. She was married for 25 years and she was asked for a divorce and did not know it was coming. A lot of us have been in that position. They both worked very highly compensated, but they had a good understanding of their finances, and they had 3 children from anywhere from 10 to 16 years of age. So 3 children, busy, busy, busy. He said he wanted to work together and that he thought they should, in the beginning, and they thought they should just take what was theirs and move on and raise the kids together. So that's always a good thought in the beginning, but they wanted to try the collaborative process and see if it could be successful, even though they did have some high complications. They wanted legal representation, but to work together as efficiently as possible, and wanted to get legal advice and guidance. They have experts come in and helped, like in this case, a divorce coach came in, a therapist, financial experts to help with all aspects of the divorce. So you can all come to an understanding of each side and that you're whole with the decisions that are being made, but also having legal representation, which is so important. They were both forthcoming with all their assets and debts and wanted the best outcome for their family and future. Now, he did waiver on the each taking their own assets, and that was able to be talked about because what was, legal and what's an equitable distribution that would be seen in the courts anyway would be that those assets are divided. So, he did waiver on that, and that was taken into consideration, and that was talked about during the collaborative process, and they were able to come to a decision and work on that change. So I'm not saying this is easy by any means, but they were able to work on that change there without lawyers going back and forth and raising the bill up. They kept their goals in mind. So the divorce was completed and they each felt like they were represented well. They knew they had their legal backing and that they had lawyers that were on their side. And they had the same lawyer and the same person helping them throughout the whole process, from start to drawing up the documents, which is very peace of mind and helpful. And they did not have to go to court. The lawyers were able to process that for them and go to court for them. They all heard the same information. It was not going back and forth, and they were able to keep their costs as controlled as possible. And we'll talk about that because costs could go up in this if it's not done the right way. But how I worked with Karen as a CDFA professional as she was going through this process. Now, another financial expert was brought in to work with both of them, but Karen was very smart and organized financially, and she had her spreadsheets. Oh my goodness, did she have her spreadsheets? But I helped her understand what each option meant to her and before she went in, so she really had a peaceful understanding in what decisions were being made and what her options were financially. She wanted the backup as she was going through because it was emotional seeing him. She wanted someone in her corner as a financial professional and to be there during the process, understand what she was going through, all the different options that were going and being made. And then after the process, to help her plan for her new budget and cash flow as she had to pay out some maintenance and really save for her kids' college and make sure her retirement that was partly taken away, to give into the other side, that was planned for and that we can build it up, and she was still in her goals. So I was able to work with her through the whole process and give her that peace of mind. She needed to be at work and at home with her kids, and she wanted a professional working with her to help her plan for her future and give that the time that she really couldn't give the time to due to emotional and everything else that she had going on. So that's a really good understanding of the collaborative process. It is a great process. And a couple things that, if 2 lawyers are working and more professionals are brought in that don't need to be brought in, that could raise the cost up, right? Because you're going to pay for those professionals. So you want to make sure that you are controlled and you understand what exactly you and your spouse need as professionals. So it doesn't work normally to involve complicated situations or if somebody is not disclosing everything, because you need the disclosure of your information is voluntary in this case also. So if you're not willing or the other side's not willing to voluntarily give all the information, this is not going to work. Collaborative will not work. Collaborative, working together. You suspect that your spouse is hiding assets, again, not going to work because this isn't to find all the assets. You need to be forthcoming. If you're not, then you each have to hire a new lawyer Because if the collaborative process doesn't work, you can't use that lawyer anymore because that lawyer knows too much on both sides. You're done with that lawyer and you need to hire a new one to take you to the rest of the way through litigation. So that's why it's important to be forthcoming and know that your spouse is going to be forthcoming with all the information. It doesn't work if your spouse has the financial power and is domineering, just like mediation, or if you have trouble speaking up for yourself or not having your voice. Do not do collaboration. You want to have your own voice. You want to have what understanding and control over the situation as well. Even though your lawyer's there, you still need to have your own voice. So lawyer can only do so much if they don't know all the information. Of course, if there is a history of mental illness or domestic violence, this does not work in the collaborative case, and both spouses have to be willing to communicate and work together, as we see. So the last process of going through a divorce is the traditional process. This is where you either ask it for a divorce or being asked for the divorce. You Google right away and say top attorneys in this county. So it is a traditional way to go, and that's why I called it traditional litigation. So it's the most common, and a majority of divorces are done this way. But litigated does not mean the divorce ends up in court. Actually, most times, the vast majority of the times, it does not end up in court, like 95% of the time. But the lawyers are going back and forth and negotiating for you, which causes the bill to go up. 80%, and why, again, there is going back and forth, it's because 80% of cases, the decision for the divorce is unilateral. One party is saying they want the divorce and the other party does not want the divorce. So by nature, that creates an adversarial situation right from the start that would disqualify them for the other options that we talked about, like mediation or collaborative process. Since both methods rely on the party's full attention and upfront and not being bitter and mean and spiteful. So let's look at the story that litigation was needed. Jim was married for 22 years. And both Jim and his wife both had decent jobs. They knew for a while a divorce was inevitable. They kind of kept working on it and going back and forth. But finally, he pulled the trigger and said, we need to file for divorce. And he filed and he hired a lawyer. So this brought on emotions to her of anger, bitterness. She was not wanting to be very agreeable and work through the process. So it made it very, very difficult and drawn out process. They had 3 kids and 1 in college, and they had some, 529 plans and college expenses to look for and loans to be paid, and all this complicated because the other person made it very difficult for Jim to help the kids and to work with the kids. So games were being played, threats were being made, and information was being withheld. So they both needed to get lawyers. He needed to protect himself, and she needed an attorney to push her along and tell her what was going on and why she needed to cooperate. And the attorneys communicated because they couldn't communicate with each other. So the documents, after a while, his divorce took a long time. It took over a year, but the documents were drawn up and they were represented in court by their lawyers and gone through because there was simple things that were fought over. That I wish wasn't fought over, but that's how it was when emotions are involved and people are hurt. So really, this was the perfect case for them to have lawyers because they needed to be protected, and they had the financial affidavit that needs to be filled out, and that is signed, and that's a legal document. If you lie in the financial affidavit, you are held in contempt of court. And then also just being able to have the discovery and having that full disclosure that the lawyers, you bring to the lawyer and the other side sees. So we know that full disclosure is happening. And if not, there's going to be consequences for that. So this is the best place to go if you think that things are being hidden. So how did I help in the process? Jim was already hired a lawyer, but he really wanted me to work with his lawyer to try to be efficient and save as much money as possible, but so he can understand his assets and I can explain it to him in a really financial way and take my time and draw everything out for him. And then also bring that over. And I met with him and his lawyer and we came up with different options and were able to give him his best options as a team. So it was a lot of fun to work and to see that we were working for the best for Jim. And then also any information that was needed, I was there. I was able to send information back and forth if I needed to, but also help plan after the divorce. I know that's a big thing, is during and after, right? Because that one person's been there. The lawyer's done after the divorce. So there's a couple lawyers that I work with that says that they will always refer to a financial planner, because in one point or another, they will refer to a financial planner because the clients need help with money management and education, because that's what's going to build them on after and make their life more successful after the divorce. So really, we're looking at retirement planning and budget and cash flow, and just planning for the future. And then there's some college planning in there as well for his other kids. So that's how litigation is different from the other three and when that worked. So the 4 options we went through were do it yourself or pro se, mediation, collaborative, and the traditional litigation process, which does not mean it's the movie theater going to court and fighting a battle, but it is 2 lawyers, really working for you. So we also learned that it's important to be prepared and to know your options in the divorce, know your financial options, know your legal options, know what process, because maybe mediation will work and you can save money, or maybe you've never even heard of collaboration before, and that sounds like a great option. This is a time in your life that you want to make the best decisions, especially if there's kids involved, to have a good co-parenting relationship for those children if it's possible. And it's important to plan into the future and always thinking of there will be a life after divorce, and how are you set up successfully for that life and being empowered. It's important to build your team of professionals. There are many professionals that help and that are really versed in divorce and help clients that are only going through divorce, like real estate agents, mortgage brokers, of course, financial professionals like a certified divorce financial analyst, and then emotional therapists or coaches to really help you move forward and process the emotions going through divorce. So it is one of the most important transitions if you're going to go through a divorce. It's one of the most important transitions to get right and to have help. Decisions are 9 times out of 10 final. So as soon as you sign on the dotted line of your divorce decree, those decisions are final. You really cannot go back unless there's something hugely, blatantly wrong or lopsided like we talked about before. Your job is to protect yourself and know your options, and you do not have to navigate alone. Build your team. Children are the most important decision, and then financial decisions are the second most important. So next steps. I want to provide you 2 offers. I want to offer you a gift of the 4 most common mistakes while going through a divorce. And I also want to offer a Rise Through Divorce session. I have saved some time in the next 2 weeks to offer these sessions to the attendees of this webinar to really go through and just meet and see what your options are and give you information and educate you on the process. This is nothing we plan for. We don't plan to go through a divorce. So why would we research before? Use somebody who is a professional that can help guide you through your options so you can make the best, most empowered decision possible. So email me at jmerida@moneyconcepts.com to get your gift of the 4 most common mistakes to avoid while going through a divorce. That is very helpful. It's a great guide. And then also to reserve your Rise Through Divorce session. I want to thank you guys for joining me today. And I hope you learned a lot about the divorce process and what options there are. And I want to leave you with a quote. Divorce is one of the most financially traumatic things you can go through. Money spent on getting mad or getting even is money wasted. Be empowered, be in control, and be educated. I can help you. Thank you again so much for joining me.